Welcome to the digital airways of Storyophonic. We're proud to introduce you to the members of a very special community, those in the spotlight and behind the scenes, the people and the personalities who make the music happen. I'm Dan Kimpel. We're proud to continue with our mission to entertain and inform you as we reveal tips and tales from deep inside the music industry. A wondrous command of technology coupled with a profound message of unity. Our in-studio guest is Trovarsi, a producer, composer, performer, and an emissary for a global creative community. Sounds for the body, the soul, and the spirit. Meet a creator whose transcendent constellation of beats and textures connects her with a worldwide audience. Welcome, Trovarsi. So glad you could come here today.
Thanks for having me.
Trovarsi, Sicilian, Italian?
Italian?
Sicilian, yeah. A conjugation of the word trovar, which means to find. So Trovarsi, therefore, to find oneself. Is that correct?
Perfect. Yep.
Oh,
yes,
cool.
that's exactly it.
So how does that name reflect your artistic vision?
I think that at the time I was producing a little bit under a different moniker, and it was also a turning point where I wasn't really sure before that, I wasn't really looking at music as doing it professionally because I was working in another career. But when I got to that point, I was like, I really want to dive in. And how do I approach this on a professional level? And I started to change my trajectory. And I was like, I need a new moniker, something that means something to me and to make this shift because I did some real life altering changes in order to make it happen, and so that was the word, and it just seemed to organically fit, so I went with it.
It looks really cool. It's a great graphic as well. I mean, it's an exciting looking word. It's got a lot of movement in it.
Thanks.
So the ideology with that, all of those things. When we think of electronic music, obviously we're thinking of the technologies that are engaged by it. And one of the things that you get to do is play live with Ableton, right? So, you have a live performance element that you get to add to the thing. So that's very cool.
Yeah, I'm always changing my setup. It's always evolving. And sometimes I use Ableton, sometimes I don't. I'm always changing the types of modules or hardware. And I think at first when I started playing live and rotating gear in, if you will, is the best way to kind of say it. I was always like, I need to find the perfect setup. And I think it wasn't until fairly recently where I just realized I'm always just going to change it, and that's okay. And I'm just embracing that. It keeps me on my toes, I guess.
The evolution of synthesizers, modules, etc., have been a very interesting thing to see. I interviewed John Lodge from the Moody Blues, who was one of the first rock bands that really utilized synthesizers. And he said at that time, you had to run down a hall. It was like a hallway full of electronics that you needed to operate, and you couldn't replicate sound. You would get that sound one time, but you couldn't necessarily get it a second time. Obviously, things have evolved from there.
Yes, a lot.
Obviously, you know the history of the instruments that you use, and sometimes sort of like retro sounds are kind of cool things. Do you ever utilize those kinds of sounds in your setup?
I do use some of the retro sounds, if you will. Specifically, the type of house and techno that I tend to lean into is more 90s, where it comes from Detroit, Chicago, and so there's always a little bit of that throwback sound, if you will. So sometimes I'm sampling. I have the desktop of a Prophet 5. I just recently have the OB6, so I'll sample some of those things and utilize that in with my current setup. You
mentioned Detroit and Chicago, because Chicago we always think of, obviously, the house music capital.
Yes.
And Detroit, did you perform in Detroit or no?
I gave a workshop.
That's what it was, So it's interesting to see Detroit kind of embrace that maybe an upper Midwest kind of thing,
Well, actually, that's where techno originated. Yeah, in Detroit. But myself, I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. Yes. So some of the first sounds that I was introduced to in terms of dance music, well, we called it dance music then, which was house. And that came up from Chicago, like Felix the House Cat, Kashmir, And all that, while that was happening, techno was being born and created and traveling all the way over to Europe, to Berlin with Tresor.
What kind of environments were you in when you were hearing that music initially? Was it clubs or was it festivals?
Initially, well, let's see, we're talking early 90s, Midwest. So this is the rave culture where, that was a lot of barns in the middle of fields where you would call a phone number and then get the location, you would drive to a drop of location to get the actual location, and sometimes you'd drive all the way out into the middle of like a field or nowhere. It'd be like an empty barn or something like that. But then there was also bars and things like that. But definitely that rave culture tends to happen in these sort of warehouse, off the grid sort of environment, which kind of made it a little bit more free, like to be yourself, and all sorts of people were there. There was no discrimination.
Well, that's a huge thing with electronic music, and it's a huge thing with your music as well. That embraces all kinds of cultures, all kinds of ideologies, and electronic music is known, I think, the music of liberation, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Madison, Wisconsin. What was it like growing up there?
Well, I started off playing violin. And I did that for a few years. And I had an aunt. She used to play piano for silent films. And as she got older and she passed away, I inherited her piano. And so then I stopped playing the violin and got heavily into playing the piano. And I played a lot by ear first, and then started taking lessons and just stuck with it. And that was pretty much what I focused on, even through high school. I was kind of a nerd, I guess, like that. My friend and I, my best friend, Becky, we would take our lunch and go to my house to play the piano. I don't know. We would always write music together or kind of focus on that mainly.
You rebel, you sneaking away to play the piano.
I wasn't always good, I'll just say that, but
Afrofuturistic was a term that I had never seen before, but I was researching you and was talking about some gigs that you did, I think in D.C. perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So one of the collectives that I belong to is the Black Techno Matters Collective. It's based in D.C., but we are on the West Coast as well, members. And it's basically just freedom of Black voice, liberation through music and expressing yourself and having that freedom to do so. And so we do a party every year on Juneteenth or around that time, and it's called Liberate. And so we have different parties in the same party but in multiple cities. So last year we did it in 7 different cities. This year we'll have some things in the works. I can't quite say yet, but we definitely are planning something for Juneteenth again, and I'm very excited about it.
Is that like a large, really big audience for that? Live audience?
Yes. And it's in multiple venues. So Detroit, Pittsburgh, New York, L.A. Last year we had it in Portland, D.C., as well as Richmond. I think I named 7 there, but...
That must be incredible to organize.
And we streamed it too. Yes. Each venue streamed it.
Each venue streamed it.
Yes.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. Pittsburgh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that necessarily as electronic music, but why not, right?
Sure.
All over the world.
Mm-hmm.
That community thing is something that really is sort of a hallmark of you and your mission. Sometimes we think about electronic music creators might, be isolated somehow within this creative thing, but collaboration and community seems to be a huge thing that you're involved with.
Yes, both of those things are actually really extremely important to me. In terms of the community, I'm one of the founders of Southern California Synth Society, and it basically started by my wife, myself, and a friend of mine, Abe Mora, and it started off very organic. Like, I needed to borrow a cable. We should hang out since we live close. And as we were all soldering and creating, making modules and putting together like our Eurorack cases, I noticed that there were these communities that would have these live performances, like modular on the spot. But there, at the time, there wasn't really any community around learning and growing. And it was always like a little bit or the extreme of you already know how to do X, Y, Z. So, but there's nothing in between. So we took that as like we needed to create that. Since it wasn't there, we needed to create the space for that. And it just unfolded, I would say, pretty organically. We started inviting people. We eventually said we should make it a thing. And so we came up with the name. And we started inviting more and more people. We started doing different things like workshops. And it really is community and all-inclusive. Like, it doesn't matter the type of music even that you're trying to make. Obviously, like, all accepting in terms of gender, identification, all that, expansive, anything. Like, that's not really what we focus on. It's just all inclusivity is really the bottom line, and in every sense of the word. Type of music, what you're using, because there have been in the past even communities where they weren't, like if you were playing with modular, for example, you could only play those specific things with modular. You couldn't use anything outside the box. And at the time, I think there was a place for that, and I understand why the person that created that space, why they did that. But as we grow and move through technology and other people have opportunities to use different things, and also other people don't have the same financial state as other people. Sure. And so we didn't want to close the door on anyone. So the idea is to be all-inclusive, create with whatever you need to create in order to get your message out, is the bottom line.
Terrific. Mm-hmm. You have singles, you have collaborations, you have remixes, you've been remixed. There's a lot of material that I could find to listen to you obsessively over the last week. Just the output is amazing. How much is out there? You don't have limitations of 4-minute songs. And I found that interesting. I can hear a 6-minute song. I can hear an 8-minute song. Does the song tell you how long it wants to be?
I think so, but it also depends on what the purpose is too. Mm-hmm. Sometimes with the modular songs, it is the song tells me. Like if it's just, I'll let that guide me. If I'm producing something in the box, something specific, or if it's a remix and it's meant to be played by DJs or something, I take that into consideration, and then I try to work within a length of 5 to 7 minutes or something like that. But I try to mix it up, really. The Modular Stages album, they're all live performances.
Yeah. Wow.
And they're short performances from various areas, like meaning I played on the East Coast, I did some things online, and they're all different genres. So there's ambient, house, techno on there as well, so...
Yeah, I spent time with that, and I did note the differences, and very interesting. Also note sometimes the line between composition and the line between sound design. I hear elements of what I know as sound design sometimes, and I think that line is really sort of indelible between those two sometimes. Mm-hmm. So how does sound design elements influence what you do or come into it, your arsenal?
Oh, well, I think when you're patching or using any sort of modular or even any synth, I feel like you naturally start to sound design, even if that wasn't your intention, like I'm going to make a specific sound. It's all about exploration. So I think that naturally unfolds in my performance, because I often feel that even if I have something patched to play a specific pattern, it's like almost like, am I playing the modular or is the modular playing me? And it's sort of like this push and pull, and things kind of start to take off, and then you turn a knob to kind of rein something in, and then maybe you hear a timbre that you like, and so then maybe you want to open the filter a little bit more and allow that to come through. and so forth, or maybe you want more modulation on it. So maybe you speed up or slow down your LFO. And through all those things, you are designing all the sounds in that moment, which is also one of the main reasons why I got into using modular synths and modules. But yeah, through that creation, you're performing, but you definitely, I feel like you're designing those sounds right in that moment. And some stuff you just can't get back, like, yeah, just you try to recreate it and you may get there a little bit with it, or you may have like some general thing with certain specific sounds, but some of them it's just, you can't. And maybe it's just the room too, like the reverb of the room that really adds something to it, especially playing in a warehouse party. That really, I've listened to recordings because I'll direct record sometimes in my set. And I find that sometimes some of it doesn't fully translate the way it does when you're listening into the room, because the vibe of the people, the sound is being absorbed in the room, the reverb, the volume. And then when you hear it in a recording, it's very clean. And some of that often isn't meant to be heard clean. It's meant to be heard in a dirty warehouse space.
Nice.
And a nice loud volume,
Yeah, I was trying to imagine what the volume, because there's a physical response to this music.
The sub and the bass
the sub
and all
gets
that.
it. Yeah,
exactly.
And I was thinking of what you said before too about sometimes in Europe, there are cathedrals that they do in different places. That sounds so interesting. Oh, I want to dance now.
Yeah, one of the clubs, I think it was, I hope I'm telling you the right name, but it was I think it was Paradiso or another one, but in Amsterdam, in the middle of the floor, maybe it wasn't. Anyway, I walk into this club and there was this organ, and it was like the pipes were all the way to the ceiling, and it was kind of off and it just kind of was dancing and happening around this, and it was this huge, like from floor to ceiling. It was amazing, and people were just dancing, and you could just sense the antiquity or of the building, just walking in like the stairs, and yeah, it was pretty cool.
This season of Stereophonic is sponsored by Novation, creators of the iconic Launchpad and Launchkey MIDI controllers. Novation's creative instruments allow you to translate ideas into reality, channeling your artistic energy to create new music. Novation seeks to inspire. Visit novationmusic.com. How aware are you of the audience during a performance? I mean, because it sounds like you've got a lot going on in terms of what you're running electronically. And are you aware of how these things affect the audience when you do a shift or when you transform something?
I want to say yes, I am all the time, but realistically, no. As a performer, sometimes I try to work on a little bit more as like just looking up. Watching some people, I can see how you kind of get sucked into what you're doing, and you want to do it perfectly and make sure that it's all coming out sonically. But I remind myself to look up, and engage with someone in front of me, and just so they know, like, kind of know that I know that they're there. I mean, I sense them obviously, and I hear them. They're dancing, and people are having a good time, but I think it's easy to get lost in your setup, especially, depending on how many instruments you're using, which also some reason why some people say keep it simple, try to keep your setups a little simple. I'm kind of hard doing that sometimes, but yeah, so I think it's a little bit back and forth, sometimes you really can get sucked into what you're doing, and then other times I can be dancing and engaging, and people are dancing and, fist pumping, and I'm dancing too or whatever. But yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's so great. What do you wear on stage?
I keep it pretty all black generally, or yeah.
Not like a big feathered headdress?
No.
Good, good. It sounds like there's enough going on there.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we should probably concentrate.
Yeah, I feel like it would like fall down and then I wouldn't be able to see what was happening. No. Yeah.
I saw reference to touring with 3 other musicians in a solar powered vehicle and solar powered recording. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So
Okay.
so it was the LA Good Vibes. So that is an RV that was designed, and he basically did all the work on it. He obviously had help, but he is Joachim Garraud, and he's from France. He lives in the U.S., but he's still touring in Europe I'd say half the year. He's a big DJ producer, and this was a dream of his. So I think it took him like 2 years to build this RV. It's a bus that you can produce on. You can record live. He's recorded live drum, like full bands on there on this at one time. I know, it's incredible. But there's beds on there. There's a little kitchen, and he has like 13 solar panels on the roof. I believe it's like 13 or 14. Has this whole intricate system built into the RV, and he wanted to do a tour. And so it was 4 producers, 4 days, 4 terrains. And so we had a driver who was absolutely amazing, and he drove us to all these different places, and we just produced. We slept very little. You'd think that it was like a little vacation, but no, but it's okay. But it was all about like just working together, creating sounds, doing sound design, playing and hiking with gear, which was interesting, to the tops of these mountains or out to the middle of the like soggy dry lake, just hiking through there and setting up in the middle of the desert there, and just, yeah, it was great. Getting footage and embracing the experience of all the different terrains. And then we turned it into a documentary, and it was mixed in Atmos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Talk about creativity. It's not just the creative of the music. It's the way that the music is presented and things like that just seem like so amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, neat.
And everybody was different, so they brought a different element and flavor to the music, which made it even more interesting, I think.
I was noticing the differences when I was listening to compilations or project things that had more than one artist. I'd listen to you, and then things were kind of connected, so I could hear the difference. But you definitely have a very clear sonic identity in what you do. It's signature.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I could recognize it. Trovarsi, because we live in Hollywood land, or Hollywood adjacent out here, I'm always thinking about music for visuals, music for film, different ways of using that. And I know that's something that you have been involved in as well, correct? Music for film?
Yes.
Yes.
I actually scored my first movie. It was amazing and very enlightening. It's a whole different world to write music, just in terms of writing and releasing music versus writing for picture. And I'm really glad that I had that opportunity. It's a lot of work, but great work, but so detailed in such a different way. And I was fortunate to work with a friend of mine who's also a composer, and he was the music editor. I was able to pick my music editor, Antone Reel, and we worked between him and I, we played all the instruments and wrote all the music for the movie. And it was, it was no house or techno at all, which was actually really liberating, like getting away from. Don't get me wrong, I love house and techno, but just I love other styles of music and other genres, and it was really nice to have the opportunity. We wrote a lot of funk. I wrote some 50s style like Cuban and salsa. I sang on there as well. I played the bass. Antone played the guitar. I revisited my piano days. I'm extremely rusty since getting into Eurorack, but I feel like when I meet producers and they're writing music, whether it's pop, house, techno, what have you, I often hear them say, "Oh, I want to write music for picture or movies," and I think that they have a different vision in mind of what that means. Meaning, like, they show up and write whatever they want, and that's not the case. I'm glad I had that experience, because I start to appreciate even more. I've always had appreciation for score and things like that, but it's a much higher level of appreciation because, you're constantly being told like, oh, what about this or that? And like, I had to learn to listen to what the director wanted. Because at first he found me because I gave him some private lessons, and he found me as a techno and house artist. And, he was like, I want some of that Trovarsi in there. And I had to learn that when he was making suggestions, I had to think about the feeling of what he was feeling to figure out what he wanted. Because what he was saying and what the feeling were not the same things. And Anton was telling me that this is pretty common, like he didn't want techno, so he wanted more funk. Yeah. And so when he was like, when we were thinking of 70s and he was thinking my vibe, I naturally went to like Donna Summers, disco, and that's not per se what he was looking for. So as soon as I had to shift my thinking and shift the way I was listening, then I could figure out. And once I figured out, like I wrote a few cues and he was like, Dad, I love this. And I was like, okay, now I know what to listen for in the conversations. And he was talking about the different cues. And then from there, it was like free flowing of writing, because writing the music for the score. But so it was more Bootsy Collins and funk and stuff, like funk. And exactly. And we took it in that direction, and It was fun. Yeah.
The title of that film, is it Latin for Manhattan, or is it?
Yes.
Or Queen of Manhattan.
Latin
for Manhattan. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes place in the 70s and early 80s. So right? Yes, yeah. I saw that as well. Some very wonderful actors and actresses in the film. Karen Manning, Jesse Metcalfe, S.A. Morales, who we remember as from La Bamba.
Yeah.
All really interesting folk. Yeah. What you just described about learning the language of a director, interviewed a lot of film composers, and once they get that locked, a lot of directors tend to use the same composers over and over and over again for films.
I can see why, because you have that. You've already laid the language, the way you can communicate with each other,
exactly.
And you can just cut out a lot of that time of learning how to translate each other's languages. So I could see that. I could see how it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. We were talking before you came in with Lindsay and Kim about the films and how sometimes, because we are music people, we tend to channel films through the music of the film, and sometimes to other people it's not really their priority. But because we're music people, it's our priority.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So it all kind of has to sit there where it is. More of this for you, you think? Is this a direction you'd like to do more of?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I mean, he's spoken to me about something he's working on, and I think for him, I think I would, just because I really enjoyed working with him. Thomas Mignon is his name, and I really enjoyed working with him, and I am grateful that he instilled the trust in me of doing my first full film score, But as I said before, it's just a different avenue of work, and I don't know.
This season of Stereophonic is sponsored by Isotope, making innovative products that inspire and enable people to be creative using AI-powered tools for mixing, mastering, audio repair, and more. Visit isotope.com. When you're performing, do you have lights behind you? Is there a visual element behind you at all? Do people
sometimes? Yeah, it just depends. Like, for example, I'm playing a show on the 30th of March, and there will be a specific visual, and he's very well known in the techno community for his visuals. So there will be a huge, different LED screens and things like that for him to project. But I always enjoy it, because it kind of plays in with the music and brings more of a vibe to the room.
Yeah, I've seen things with lasers done with electronic music, which are pretty arresting. Just another layer of it, I guess.
It's more like, for example, I went to this show, a friend of mine, and they were videoing him playing, but then they were taking that footage and using other elements and kind of mixing, almost like a video mixing with these different layers. So it just depends. Like every show is different. Sometimes it's just lights. Sometimes it's just cinematic cuts, like different cuts of different films. Some of it is sort of digital art, I guess, like moving digital art. And then a lot of it is also this layers of taking live footage and feeding it in and then mixing it with different things that they've already created.
Wow. It is such a sensory, this type of music lends itself to such sensory experience. And liberation, the thought of liberation, how music can liberate people, and this kind of music obviously liberates people. Are there a lot of women folk working in this space?
Yeah, there are, but not enough. I think as we bring more awareness and come together, then more of that is coming forward. But I definitely want to see more focus on women performing, engineers, running businesses, being the label owners, all of that. And I think that over the past few years, I feel like we've become even more vocal in that. And I hope that it only keeps going, if that makes sense. I think that this new generation that's coming up, I think they're extremely vocal, and I really like that. We need that. And it helps push that of the non-binary, gender expansive, being all-inclusive, and not focusing so much on the typical cis white male. Sorry. Just kidding. But
it's fine.
but just getting out there and I find that there are a lot more groups of women that are putting together, like, for example, myself and my wife, SoCal Sin Society. There's We Make Noise, Sound by Girls. There's the Women's Audio Mission, and all of these different organizations are really coming together to educate, put on workshops, and just give as much free education as well, like just to help elevate. And I think that's extremely important. That's the only way it's going to happen is if we come together and push the same agenda.
Absolutely. Here at Stereophonic, if you've listened to our past episodes, we're very, very women-centric with a lot of emphasis on those communities. And we notice it a lot in the film composition area as well. There are a lot of more women composers than there were 10 years ago, and we get to see it. And, in music in general, I mean, the Grammys this year is the year of the woman, so that's very cool. So what you talked about with a non-binary, I think back to the early days of electronic music with Wendy Carlos, a creator who was a trans artist, and obviously that's not unusual within the electronic music communities as it opens up. So glad to see that heritage kind of extending itself to the new gen.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And women rock.
Yes.
We see a lot of women playing non-traditional that we would think of women instruments, which is great. Screaming guitars and kick-ass drums and bass. All that's good.
All of it.
All of it is really, really good. You're getting ready now to go to China, correct?
Yes. April 1st.
How much gear are you going to take?
I am just now... I feel like I finalized my setup. I am trying to pack light so I can travel pretty fluidly. So I will take a smaller modular rack and a couple of other hardware pieces. I am going to use like the Novation circuit tracks. I'm also going to use the Digitact by Electron and 6U 104 HP case. And I may or may not throw some other little thing in there. I'm not 100% sure. But for the most part, that's where I'm sitting with right now.
Will it all fit in your carry-on?
Yes, that is the crucial thing. Yeah, that's like a big thing for me. A lot of artists, I won't say a lot. I feel like there are artists that will check their stuff, like check check it, and then there's some that will absolutely not, and I fall into the absolutely not. And I just, every time I think about, oh, well, maybe I should check it, I always hear horror stories that remind me, okay, that's the reason why you don't want to check your bag and check your gear, I mean. I'll check my clothes, but I can always buy clothes if they...
Yeah.
My bag is like, yeah. But I can't show up to play a show with no gear. So, yeah, I feel more comfortable being able to carry it on. So I try to build my setups with the intention of that, which also can be a little challenging. But because I always want to take extra stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to think about that, about having like backups on things. I don't know, put fear into you, but you have to think about that, right?
Like backups in what sense?
I don't know. I mean, I've seen people that sometimes will have spare things with them, or things that might be difficult to obtain in different areas of the world. I don't know.
Well, I guess I'm not carrying too much like spare, like, you know, double pieces of gear just because of the whole space issue, right? Yeah. But I mean, I carry a USB with music.
Yeah.
I guess so if I have to, I'm not going to stand up there and whistle, right? So, so if I have to plug in a USB, then I'll do that. But typically I try to, I troubleshoot and everything, and I back up my files. So for example, for my circuit tracks, I know that if I upload all my files onto our website components or something like that, then I can always find or borrow or buy another circuit tracks and then just load those files onto it. So in that sense, I kind of back up. But if that, yeah, I guess that's backing stuff up a little bit. The modular is like, yeah, if it's gone, it's gone. I don't know.
But it sounds like you can improvise around certain things because your thing is not set in stone. You know, as you say, it's constantly evolving anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, yes and no. I mean, I'm playing an hour set minimum, right? It depends on what I would be left with, if that makes sense. Like if I could play for an hour on, you know what I'm
interesting
saying, right?
Enough,
Yeah. But for the most part, yeah, I can improvise my way through some. Just depends, I guess.
Well, as you said, you can stand there and whistle.
Right, yeah, no. At that point, I would just DJ, right? But I would be also like have whole other ball of problems to worry about if all my gear were missing. But
we are so glad that you could be with us and educate us so many ways about what the sound of the future is. It's now, but it's also very futuristic, you know? And we appreciate you being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I want to report back on the China trip because I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. I'm really looking forward to it.
Good. And if any of our listeners are in China right now, get ready. Thank you for listening to Stereophonic. Our shows are recorded, produced, and mixed by Lindsay Tomasic. Kim Strand is our production director. Our theme song is by Daddle Light Mine. Give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Special thanks to our season sponsors, Isotope and Novation. I'm Dan Kimpel on Stereophonic.
Are you ready for an adventure?